Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City building and code consulting firm. Today, I have the honor of having Mike Nucatola from Nucatola Development. Michael, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Sisto. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, great to have you. We had some time over the last couple of weeks to chat a little bit about you coming on the show. And as always, we always talk about how you get here. And there's always a reoccurring theme. So, Michael, who do you know, and how did you get here, and how did I get you here?
So we have a couple of mutual friends, Anna Tracy Hawkins, Chris Lapenzina. Anna Tracy I've known for almost a decade. Chris I've known for almost 20 years. I worked for him. He was at my wedding. I've known him for a very long time, and he's been a great help in my career.
Yeah, Chris has been on the show as well. Chris is a great guy. Juggles a lot of different hats,
Yes.
as we all do, from parking garages to new development to, renovations. Anything that their firm is doing, Chris is the guy. So
We also have similar backgrounds. He's an engineer and has an MBA, same as I do. So it's
and got involved in construction.
Yep.
So he didn't take the engineering path; he took the construction path, but the engineering background. Yeah. So here we are. You came in. We had a little chat today about projects you're on and what you do. So tell us a little bit, because when you use the word development, it automatically means that you're developing something, but sometimes you're not really developing for yourself. You're helping other people develop. So tell us a little bit about your background and what what you're doing these days, and really what's your business about.
So I went to engineering school at Cooper Union, but I fell into construction. When I was there, we had the attack on the World Trade Center. When we came back to school, one of the class projects I was in, we were going to redesign a waste treatment plant on the Upper West Side. Decided to go in a different direction and submit a proposal for a new World Trade Center development.
Wow.
As part of that, I went to talk to general contractors to get a real-world perspective, because I was young in college, didn't know any better, and ended up at Plaza Construction one day, talking to them about it. Spent an hour with them. John Caramellis said, "What are you doing this summer?" I said, "I don't know." "Why?" He says, "You work for me now." And I've never left construction, and that was almost 25 years ago.
Fun fact about that is Joe Christensen and John Caramellis both worked with my wife 35 years ago at Humphreys and Harding. And Joe Christensen introduced me to my wife, and we've been friends forever. And I'm obviously happily married since, going on our 36th year.
Wow.
And Joe Christensen and John both worked with my wife. And you fast forward about the power of people. And you said Plaza, and you said estimating. And I said, well, you had to have crossed paths with both of them. Mm-hmm. And you actually worked for both of them. So, people say in New York City, the construction industry is incestuous. There is no doubt that in this city, if you've been around long enough, you will meet someone who knew someone that was your mentor, your boss, your friend. And here you go. We spoke for a few minutes, and we connected with many, many people. And that's really why I love doing this podcast, because I do get to meet other people through others. So you're at Plaza, you're doing estimating, and here you are. You're in the construction world at a Cooper Union.
It's a very small industry, and you do get to, even we do a lot of work, but you meet everyone over time. And I was at Plaza for a couple of years, and I went to go work at a subcontractor to see what that was like. And then I went back to work for another general contractor. And then I went to work for a developer who was vertically integrated. So I was doing development and general contracting. And then I went...
Great experience.
Yeah, I did that for a few years. And then I went to go work at Rock Rose, where I was doing the same thing. And
With
that's
Chris.
where I met Chris.
Yeah.
I spent a few years there. And then I went to grad school at the University of Michigan, did my MBA, and went out on my own about 12, 13 years ago to do this. And what I'm doing now is I do special situations consulting. I can do, and I do for a lot of clients, conventional owner's representation work. But a lot of times...
They kind of go hand in hand.
They do.
It just depends on the project that you get and what they're asking you to be involved in, right? Same thing with us. Our business is similar. Sometimes it's a straight cookie cutter. I want to put up a couple of walls this summer at a private school on the Upper West Side. yeah, it's some paperwork and do it, but oh, by the way, we forgot to tell you, we need to relocate these people and we want to use the gym. Well, you can't use the gym for offices over the summer.
Yeah.
We got to figure it out, right? So there's the complexity is always in the details, you know.
And I actively seek out the most complex projects that are out there. There are a lot of people who are hesitant to get involved in those kinds of projects from all aspects of construction. It's not for everyone. But now when I look at a project like 161 Maiden Lane, which is in the news a lot because it's leaning and you know it's been abandoned, I would love to work on that. That's an
Right.
exciting project to me.
That's what fuels you.
Yeah, I like problem solving, and I'm always looking for complicated projects. And so people reach out to me when they have problems that their team can't handle.
Well, you know, I think, you know, to clarify that just a little bit, you know, because we work with a lot of owners reps, some big, some small, some are 100 people and some are 2 people, you know, and owners reps. And owners representation is vastly vague at times because some owners reps do cost consulting, they do project management, they do so many different aspects of a project. So when you say owners representation, it's what your definition is and what your clients are expecting of you. So if you're on a project, they may want all of these things or they want some of these things. So, you know, just saying I'm an owner's rep, you know, it's just that's the vertical you're in. But what are you really doing day to day? You know,
It's a very broad topic.
Yeah.
Most of my time is spent solving
Problems.
very complex construction problems. Not always construction problems, but that is about 80% of what we do.
and some of it is, hey, we need financing. Hey, if we move this, what happens to our schedule? So, you know, I always find that having an owner's rep on a lot of our projects absolutely adds value to the project. I always felt that even though I'm not involved in a lot of day-to-day projects anymore, I do have some, that when there's an owner's rep, there's a continuity, there's a communication that is much clearer. You're able, that when we send an owner something, you're saying, wait, hold on a minute. I can explain this to you. I can make this clearer for you, why they're sending you this or why we're going to go down this path. And I think that it creates a great way to keep the project moving, not letting it stall, and keeping it in the direction it needs to go.
Yeah. And on that same topic, often there are owners' representatives on these projects that I work on. And what we're focusing on is risk management. So there's the proactive side where we're trying to identify the risks for the developer and talk about either how to avoid them or how to mitigate them should they come up. And then there's the reactive part where you have become a special situation. What do we do here? How do we resolve this problem?
What's the path?
Exactly. And not only coming up with a solution, but also implementing the solution, being able to reach out into your Rolodex and know who can actually provide the services that you're suggesting, because not everybody can do that.
Right. And it's just to get a chuckle. When I tell the staff here that I'm going to look in my Rolodex, it gives away my age. Because they're like, what's a Rolodex? And I go, oh, well, it was this thing.
You
And then I
had it on
go,
the desk
it
and
was
it
this
spit
thing
around.
on, and I go, I'm not even going to explain this. It's my contact list.
Yes.
But the true, in this city and in this environment, it's not everything that you know, but it's who you know to help our clients.
Yep.
Hey, you got a problem? You know what? I haven't worked with Sisto in a couple of months, but you know what? He's the right guy to ask this question for this situation. And you pick up the phone. You're comfortable enough to say, hey, Sisto, I got this problem. Should we file the tenant protection now? Should we wait? And you get your answer. And that's because the power of people in our industry help us. We're never on an island by ourselves. We're just not. And if you are in this city, then you're in the wrong city, because there are so many subject matter experts in so many places. I call Chris Lapenzina many times where I have a client who has, their main business is this, but they got a parking lot on their campus. They have no idea what to do with their parking lot. So I call Chris and he guides me. I'm not the expert, but I know where to go and I know who to ask.
And that is a really important part of this. I mean, I called you a few months ago about an embassy project that we looked at where they own this building for many decades. The CO and what they were actually doing with it didn't match.
Right.
They had additional FAR that they wanted to capitalize on, and they wanted to make it into residential since they had abandoned the embassy. And it was very complex, and we had to come up with a solution for that.
And that's the power of people, especially in this city, you know. And today, that integration, that social aspect of construction has changed. You know, you'll go to events now where there used to be 2,000 people at, you know, a building congress event, and, you know, it's not the same because who's working from home, who's not working here in New York City anymore. And, you know, the dynamics of our construction world have changed. You know, for me, after 4 decades, it has changed. You know, there's no doubt about it. The job sites have changed, the way the job sites are run, the security, just everything about them. So we have to change with them. So, you know, segueing into that, we did have a really great conversation about, you know, there are definitely labor issues in New York, right? And I don't want to on a political level, but I mean, just from the fact that I've had several shows with Bob Zirkle came on from E.W. Howell and said that there is not this apprenticeship that used to be here years ago. Younger people coming into the industry who want to be masons or plumbers or electricians or just any source of it. That's a problem. And the other problem that may be a problem but may not, that you and I had a discussion about, was you know, the use of robotics. You know, we're not climbing on scaffolds anymore, looking at facades anymore. We're using drones, and we got monitors on everything. So since you're in the field a lot and you work on complicated, diverse projects, give us a little sense of, you know, do you agree that a lot less people are coming into the construction world?
I do. I see all around the world, many markets are struggling with labor. It's less attractive compared to options where you can work from home, and your ability to stay in the industry is challenging compared to working in front of a desk.
Just from the physical aspect.
It's a lot of physical activity. I think robotics will alleviate a lot of that and allow more people to come in. You know, you could spend years working as an apprentice to learn how to do masonry, or the robot can know how to do it, and all you have to do is learn how to, you know, operate the robot.
That's amazing.
I think there's more opportunities for that. It will be much healthier going forward as we continue to develop robotics and integrate it, and it becomes more affordable on projects. I think small and mid-sized projects are going to struggle with this, but larger projects with bigger budgets who can explore these kinds of ideas are going to see real value in taking advantage of this.
Well, you know, offline we talked about this, and I'd love to make this point, is, you know, I see myself, I'm 60 years old in January, and I'm still an avid outdoorsman, play a lot of golf, hike a lot, spend a lot of time in the woods. And I know physically it's challenging now compared to the way it was 20 years ago. And I can see how a craftsman, if they could learn how to use the computer and they could run the robot, their wisdom of 40 years will keep them in the construction world a lot longer.
Yes.
And their knowledge is tremendous for their boss, because they know the way their boss works, they know the way their industry works, they know what's good, they know what's bad, they know what's profitable, they know where and yet if they could use a robotic, but they're still the brains behind the operation, he or she, they can stay in the game a lot longer and keep our workforce going. I mean, that's a huge piece that, you know, you think, oh, they're just going to take our job. No, there's still somebody that's got to.
Yeah. I think it also extends the time that someone who has that knowledge can then transfer that knowledge to someone else. You know, as more people leave and we have less coming in, that's going to be a huge challenge for contractors and developers going forward.
And I think that's definitely a problem already, because the power of people. How many times do people call me and say, hey, sister, you work with so many different firms. You've been around for such a long time. I'm looking for a good estimator. I'm looking for a good project manager. We can't find anybody. We go through 100 resumes. Nobody wants to come to the office. He goes, we do estimating on, you know, $150 million government projects. That person needs to work next to me so that when we're going through it, Did you get this? Did you do that? He goes, and some of them are old school. They don't get the concept of a Zoom and trying to do an estimate on a $150 million project without that person working next to them. So I think that there's a lot of moving parts there. But clearly, you can even tell when you're watching sports and certain advertisements on certain days that unions are reaching out looking for people to go into their fields because they just can't get the younger generation of people to come in.
I know some national GCs are developing training programs and improving their marketing to try and bring people in. It's going to be a long-term problem. Robotics will help alleviate that, but I expect the best labor to charge a premium for their services because there's not going to be as many people to be able to do that.
And I think that is clearly, it's been around after COVID, and I don't think it's gotten better.
Yeah.
I mean, from the people that have been on this show and other people that I've spoken to, they're always looking. You know, even us, we're always looking for people. You know, just it's a challenge. But the second part of it, you and I were talking about robotics, right? We were talking about, you know, these days, safety of the people working is important too. You know, we put a big emphasis in New York. You know, this show is very pro-law, very pro-safety. You know, today there is an enormous amount of a budget on a project in general conditions that relies around security of the site. You know, all these accidents that are happening, how the city has implemented different ways, you know, even unions, 20 minutes of stretching before the job starts so that they can alleviate injuries, right? And yet, years ago, I know myself, I used to sit outside at Pratt with an engineer who had a set of binoculars and he was looking up at the parapet because they didn't want to get on a scaffold to go and check the bricks. And today, I was at a job site the other day where the guy had a drone, he had a computer, and he goes, I think the third row, 17th brick in might be, you know, might have a problem. And he flies the drone up and they have it on a, you know, on a BIM, and they're able to see the whole facade, and they basically scan it with, you know, without setting a scaffold and putting humans in danger to go up there and physically, you know, tap on the brick like we did, you know, back in the day. So tell us a little bit about how you see that integration in construction today.
I think that our abilities to have drones and 3D scanning greatly improves the accuracy and of what we're building on site, makes renovations a lot easier. I have a friend who's working on a high-rise curtain wall project for replacing existing curtain wall. They had a drone survey the entire building, marked every caulk joint in the building and what was wrong with it. And it was fascinating that, you know, it makes his job
you're talking
a lot
about a caulk joint that's this big.
Yeah. And he didn't have to drop a single scaffold to do it.
That's my point.
And it saved an enormous amount of time and money to do it. There's a lot of opportunities to create value like that on projects. But if you don't know that, you're doing something the same way for 30 years, you're not up to speed. It's really important that you are constantly getting educated on what's changing in the business, and it helps you make better decisions going forward, which is how you avoid becoming a special situation or how you dig yourself out of a hole when you're in one.
I always say that the more information that you have and the more accurate information you have, the better you can run a project, set a budget up for it, and stay within the budget. When you were doing those things and you didn't want to stay on that scaffold for 15 hours, you know, a week, you know, 15 hours, you budgeted 15 hours to do the survey and then you only got halfway, and now you're rushing to get it done, and then you start the job, and then the contractor's got extras, you know, because the information wasn't accurate. And like you said, now with this drone system, you can go and look at a caulk joint, you know, a couple of 100 feet up in the air, 30 stories up, and you're able to hone in on it and go, oh my God, this is a lot worse than we thought, you know, without hanging from a scaffold. So
roof surveys that are inaccessible areas or very challenging to access, send the drone up, have a look at it.
Exactly.
Right? I was on a project the other day where they had a robot doing layout on the floor. So they brought in a company to 3D scan the space. They transferred that information into BIM, right? The architect then adjusted his plans to match the existing. They then gave that information to the tech, and this robot runs around like a little Roomba on the deck, and lays out the entire set of drawings, architectural, MEPs, everything gets marked out where it has to go. Every penetration, every wall, sheetrock, everything gets marked out on the drawings.
You're making me laugh because back in the day when I worked at Taggart, 35 years ago, 37 years ago, I used to do the slot and sleeve drawings on the deck for all the plumbing.
Yeah.
And we used to have this, line down the middle, and we used to bring it to the plumber, and you were off, and he would say, "Sisto, thanks for the slot and sleeve drawing, but I got 3 slots out on 6th Avenue. I think you ran the wrong dimension." Yeah. So that was time and money back then, So it's amazing today that that technology and the speed of it. The one thing that I'm always interested in hearing from people like yourself that are on the owner's rep side, on the development side, is with today's technology and the speed at which we can do things, why is everything just so expensive?
So I talk to a lot of outsiders about this who work at consulting firms that are trying to get information. The construction industry has intentional information asymmetry. No one wants to tell anyone else how much money they're making, right, because they don't want to rock the boat and reduce their margins. Right. Margins in construction are very healthy compared to other industries that have become more commoditized, like airlines, for example, right, that are operating on 4% margins.
Right, but contractors don't work on 4%.
No. I mean, I remember sitting in a meeting where a contractor told me that he was worried about the project because he was only making 15%. He wasn't sure he could afford to feed his children. And, when you hear stories like that, you have to think, people are making a lot of money in this business. And as a result, they're unwilling to share information or embrace new things because
they want that square footage to be. So if they did find that edge, they're not passing that along.
That's right.
For it to be valued engineered and value cost savings.
Yes, they're keeping it for themselves.
Yeah.
And that is how people continue to make money in this business. And it makes it very hard for others to find value if you don't know what's going on.
Agreed. So staying on the cost, right, which is always has there's always a conversation about costs because whatever the developer's going to do, even as homeowners like myself, I'm doing a renovation. We spoke today about your new project that you're starting for yourself with your wife, and we always worry about cost, and we try to project our costs. And while we're doing this projection, it was a few years ago, it was COVID and the supply chain. And then after COVID, it was something else. And now here we are, start of 2025. The rumbling in the industry is hurry up, get it done, because, we're getting tariffs, right? So there's always a concern. So a few years ago it was COVID. Last time it was gasoline prices. So when you're in this industry for as long as you and I have been, but I'm a lot longer than you, you've heard them all, So what are you hearing about tariffs and how concerned are developers and contractors related to their materials?
So everyone's hearing about tariffs. It's in the news. It's very hard to buy anything now and have a price that will hold for more than 30 days. Prices will go up. They always go up. And people are just building into it. I remember probably the most exotic one that I had to deal with was buying light fixtures from China, and they were on a container ship that got attacked by pirates. This goes back almost 15 years, and whether the insurance company would pay out, because we didn't know if we were going to get our light fixtures, and then going forward, we had to write into our contracts that all shipments from China had to go through the Panama Canal instead of the Suez Canal to avoid pirates. And it raised our costs at the time. Things are always going to get more expensive, and you adapt, and you build it in. And if you're smart, you are doing this ahead of time so that you're not surprised later, and you have to make a capital call because you didn't anticipate these things.
Right, and I think, that no matter... I have a lot of friends that are in, they supply, a real dear friend of mine, Richard Pacey, he works for American Lumber, and they supply lumber around the country. They're in upstate New York, and you know, when COVID hit, they couldn't get a supply chain. Wood went, what was costing them $500,000 for a truckload of, a freight load of cedar was $750,000. And then once that passed and things changed, it went back to where it needed to be. Still was higher than where it was before because there was other layers of problems. So I think I don't want to say, I think there's always these things in the construction market that you have to adapt. You're 100% right. You can't forecast that things are going to be where they are today in 6 months from now, because if that was the case, then there would be no increases to anything we buy.
That's right.
Right, eggs are $10 a dozen right now. No one, but there's an outbreak with a flu. These things happen. So going forward, have you seen? So as we spoke before,
lumber's a really good example, by the way. I buy a lot of lumber from Canada, right? If the price
well,
of
that's
flooring,
why I brought it up, because
Yeah,
he's getting calls left and right. Most of his lumber comes from Northwest Canada.
right. So if lumber in Canada, if white oak flooring goes from $6 to $7.50 a square foot for Canadian lumber, maybe I'll look for a South American product or domestic product that's
Correct.
only $7 a foot, and
Well,
you
and
just
I think-
adapt. It's like anything else.
Listen, I just bought my floors. They come from Sweden. Today they're $10. Maybe next week, if my wife really wants it and she wants me to spend $11.50, then
And
you're
you'll
going to
do it.
figure it out.
That's right.
If not, you're going to
That's what
tell her we're going to have to
happens.
get something else.
That's what your
I think-
contingency is for.
Right, and I think that if you, in our world, with so many different products that go into a building, if you focus in on just one part of it, you probably may spend too much on this part, but if you lose sight of everything else, it's definitely going to get a lot worse. It's not going to get much better. So on the show, as we try to wrap it up, my good friend Andrew Peters from Curry and Brown, who's a cost estimator, always says that the rear view mirror is this big and the windshield is this big. We always want to look forward. We don't want to look back. So I always ask our guests to give us a projection for the upcoming year. And you can pick any topic you like. I mean, I like cost construction because I know you do a lot of that with your customers. Where do you think cost is going to be in 2025?
Well, that's a tough one. Probably another 4 or 5%, maybe even a little bit more. I think inflation reports are down. Economy's in a better spot, and this is despite the 25% tariffs. I don't think 25% tariffs means that I can expect material costs to go up 25% on
Well, you
my
made
job.
a really valid
I
point
think
about that.
That's not what's actually going to happen. We'll look for other ways to get the project done. And materials are not 100% of your project. But I do think costs will go up. That's
Well,
for sure.
I think you made a great point about that, and I appreciate that, and I hope our listeners appreciate that, which is, okay, so you were going to do it with this material, and there's a tariff on it at 25%, but these are alternates, these are equivalents. You may, if you don't have it in your contingency to stay within that, then you're gonna search for a way to make the project successful, and that's your job. That's what other people's jobs are.
I worry about smaller developers who maybe don't have the financial means to make good decisions are going to look at these increased material costs and try to cut corners elsewhere, and then
That's a
put
fair
themselves in a difficult situation. I think larger projects with healthier budgets are not going to have that problem. But if you're running on thin margins, you're definitely going to run increased risk
the
to try to make up for
contingency's
that.
not there.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, this was great. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. First of all, best of luck to you with your new home.
Thank
and,
you.
And taking on your own project instead of someone else's. So you're going to have a tough customer. The client's going to be tough.
I thank you for having me here. I'm not looking forward to working for this particular client. It's probably going to be the most difficult client in my career.
Yourself and your wife.
Yes, but I will get through it.
Awesome. Looking to have you back.
Thank you.